You know what's actually insane about Granny? Not the bat. Not the jump scares. Not even the fact that this woman hears a spoon hit the floor from another dimension. The terrifying part is that Granny doesn't feel like a monster. She feels like somebody whose brain completely collapsed. And once you notice that, the entire game changes. Because suddenly you stop asking, how do I escape Granny? And you start asking, what the hell happened to her? Was she always violent? Why does she trap people instead of instantly killing them? Why does the house feel weirdly personal? And why does everything in this game feel less like horror, and more like a mental breakdown frozen in time? Today we're dissecting the psychology of Granny. And trust me, by the end of this video, you might stop seeing her as a villain entirely. We dissect so you don't have to. Now here's the first thing nobody talks about. Granny's house doesn't feel abandoned. It feels preserved. That's important, because abandoned places feel dead. But Granny's house feels protected, like somebody is desperately trying to stop time itself from moving forward. Look around the house carefully. Family photos, old furniture, hidden rooms, locked doors, secret tunnels. Nothing feels random. Everything feels intentional. And psychologically, that changes everything. Because this doesn't feel like the home of a killer. It feels like the home of somebody terrified of losing the last thing they still recognize. And that brings us to the first major question. What if Granny isn't hunting people? What if she's protecting something? Because once you start looking at Granny psychologically, the game becomes way darker. Watch how Granny moves through the house. She patrols. She listens. She reacts instantly to sound. But weirdly enough, she almost never acts emotional. She acts territorial, like an animal protecting a collapsing nest. And that behavior actually matches real psychological trauma patterns. People who experience severe isolation, grief, abandonment, or paranoia over long periods of time can become hyperdefensive about physical spaces. Their safe zone shrinks. Eventually the home becomes everything. Outside becomes danger. And strangers become threats automatically. That sounds exactly like Granny. Think about the amount of security inside the house. Barricades. Escape prevention. Hidden pathways. The house itself feels paranoid. Almost like the architecture is reflecting Granny's mind. And horror games love doing this. Silent Hill did it. Resident Evil did it. Layers of Fear did it. The environment becomes psychology. Which means Granny's house might literally be a physical version of her mental state. And if that's true, then the basement becomes horrifying. Because psychologically, basements almost always represent suppressed truth, buried trauma, hidden memories. The deeper you go into Granny's house, the uglier everything becomes. That's not accidental design. That's symbolism. And it suggests something terrifying. Granny may be hiding from her own past. But here's where things become genuinely depressing. What if Granny wasn't always like this? Imagine this version of the story. An old woman slowly loses everyone around her. Maybe her family dies. Maybe they leave her behind. Maybe her mental condition pushes them away. Over time the house changes. It stops becoming a home and starts becoming a museum. A place where memories are frozen because moving on feels impossible. Now here's the terrifying psychological part. Human beings need social connection to stay mentally stable. Without it, the brain starts distorting reality. Routine becomes obsession. Protection becomes imprisonment. Fear becomes identity. And suddenly Granny's behavior makes horrifying sense. Because think about this carefully. Why does a Granny instantly kill the player? Seriously. If murder was the goal, the game would end immediately. Instead, she traps you, keeps you inside, prevents escape. That's not normal predator behavior. That feels emotional. Almost like she physically cannot allow people to leave her again. And honestly, that's scarier than a demon. Because demons are fantasy. Broken loneliness is real. But now we hit the detail that completely changes the game. Granny's hearing. This woman hears everything. A dropped object. A creaky floor. A tiny mistake. Instant reaction. And most players think that's just game design. But psychologically, it might actually make perfect sense. There's a condition called hypervigilance. It happens when somebody's nervous system gets trapped in permanent survival mode. Trauma victims sometimes become extremely sensitive to sounds, movement, and environmental changes because their brain constantly expects danger. Which means Granny's hearing might not be supernatural at all. It might be trauma. Now suddenly every moment in the game changes meaning. You're not just alerting a monster. You're triggering somebody whose brain literally cannot relax anymore. And once you realize that, the game becomes deeply uncomfortable. Because now Granny starts feeling human. Too human. But the most disturbing part of the entire game is actually Granny's silence. Think about it. Most horror villains talk eventually. They scream, explain themselves. Granny barely says anything. And psychologically, silence is powerful because it forces your brain to fill in the gaps. That's why players project different interpretations onto her. Some people think she's possessed. Others think she's supernatural. Others think she's mentally destroyed. And honestly, the third explanation is the most terrifying one. Because it feels possible. You can imagine a real person slowly collapsing into isolation and paranoia until they stop functioning normally. And that's why Granny works so well psychologically. She feels emotionally believable. But now we need to ask the question nobody wants to ask. What if the player isn't innocent either? Because horror games love unreliable perspectives. And Granny's story gets darker the more you think about it. The game never fully explains why we enter the house. That matters. What if Granny experienced repeated break-ins before? Robberies. Violence. Threats. What if every intruder slowly blended together in her deteriorating memory? That would explain why she reacts instantly to noise. To her, outsiders may no longer look human. They look dangerous. Again, that doesn't justify her actions, but it changes the psychology behind them completely. And the best horror villains are rarely pure evil. They're damaged humans whose pain mutated into something monstrous. Which leads to the most depressing possibility in the entire game. What if Granny is trapped too? Think about it. She never leaves the house. She endlessly patrols the same hallways, protects the same rooms, repeats the same routines, guards the same memories. The house isn't just a prison for victims. It's a prison for Granny herself. And maybe the reason she keeps trapping people is because she's terrified of being abandoned one more time. Now suddenly everything changes. Every locked door feels emotional. Every trap feels desperate. Every chase feels tragic. Not because Granny is innocent. She isn't. But because the game stops feeling like monster attacks victim and starts feeling like a broken human being desperately trying to stop her entire world from disappearing. And honestly, that's why Granny became iconic. Not because she's loud, not because she's flashy, but because underneath all the horror game mechanics, there's something painfully human hiding there. Loneliness, isolation, mental collapse, fear of abandonment. A person who forgot the difference between protecting love and imprisoning it forever. We dissect so you don't have to. But maybe some minds are better left locked in the basement. If you enjoyed this psychological breakdown, subscribe to channel. And tell me in the comments, do you think Granny was always evil? Or did loneliness create the monster?